Now, we've had a part one and a part two of what I'm talking about here. Part one dealt with sort of how I discovered this system and how it works. And part two dealt with, and I did a dentist example in part one. Part two dealt with the tax cases, the Overs tax case, the Evans tax case, and the Lipson tax case, and rulings by Judge Little and Judge Bowman in how they ruled in cases and why they ruled and what happened in the Supreme Court ruling. Now what I want to do is sort of go back to this history of mortgage interest as a deduction, because I said in part one that and I'm laying claim to it, discovered it, founded it, started it, conceived of it, first published it in November 1976. Actually, it was July 76, if I remember right. And because that was about when but it was published in November 76. And those of you who live in BC will remember that in 1972, the David Barrett government, NDP government, came in, canceled the regular insurance. And when they canceled the regular insurance, they brought in ICBC. And for 2 or 3 years, it was really hard to decide what the heck happened and who was responsible for what. And that was why, one of the reasons why the lady in question here had taken so long to get her money, because it was the changeover in the insurance, and it was all a big pain in the neck for everybody at that time. But I have to say that, and this is, I haven't got a single piece of paper that says this and documents it. I guess a couple of people, Vida Crawford, would remember, because of the politics that were going on at the time. In 1979, somehow or other, for a very brief period of time, I was appointed the policy chairman of the Conservative Party. Joe Clark was in power. Vic Stevens was the president of the provincial Conservative Party. He's now Stevens and Holman in the outfit that regularly advertises on television in Vancouver for accident cases and dealing with ICBC. But it was an interesting series of times, an interesting time to be alive. And one of the things that we did for the 1979 tax return was we got the Joe Clark government to put mortgage interest as a deduction on the Canadian tax return. And if you happen to have a 1979 tax return around, you can dig it out and find, and we're going to have to find one of those, Richard. I've got to have one around here somewhere in one of those files. Because the 1979 Canadian tax return did have a place for mortgage interest as a deduction on it in a 4-page form. Well, then on December the 12th, 1979, there was a vote of confidence, and Joe Clark had a minority government, but with the SOCREDs, the Social Credit Party, Rael Cowett was the leader, the 5 members of the Social Credit Party, that plus the Conservatives, was enough to have to win the vote in the House of Commons. And the Social Credit intended to vote in favor of the Conservatives, but Joe Clark, bless his soul, called this vote of confidence, and he then, and he knew he was going to win it, supposedly, but when he saw all his Conservatives were in the House, he forgot that the Social Credits had to arrive as well. Called the vote of confidence. There was a vote. There were more Liberals than there were Conservatives because the SOCREDs weren't there. They were having a little meeting around the corner, hadn't entered the House yet, and Joe Clark's government fell. And this is the famous time when Trudeau supposedly went for a walk in the cold and decided whether he was going to resume his leadership of the Liberal Party, because he had resigned. But he did. He came back after his walk in the snow, and he said, I'm going to be the leader again. And he was the leader, and he ran against Joe Clark. The Liberals ran. And one of the things they ran against was Joe Clark's 18-cent a liter gas tax that he was putting on gas at the time. And Trudeau said, no, we're not going to do that. And that was the big thing that stopped the Conservatives from being re-elected. Trudeau got re-elected after 9 months in the cold, because Joe Clark was Prime Minister for just 9 months. And next thing you knew, Trudeau had brought in not only a 22-cent a liter gas tax, he also Remember this? Brought in wage and price controls and all sorts of other things. It was horrible. Anyway, we lost mortgage interest as a deduction.